It was a bright Tuesday morning at the Oakwood Trust Bank, nestled in the heart of the bustling metropolis. A fresh-faced young woman named Clara Jennings had just begun her role as the bank's new branch manager. Eager to prove herself in her first leadership position, Clara had meticulously prepared for the day. She was determined to impress her supervisors and customers alike. The air was thick with anticipation as the bank operated at full capacity. Just as Clara was reviewing some paperwork behind the counter, the door opened, and in walked a man. He appeared to be in his early 50s, wearing a plain button-up shirt and well-worn jeans. Despite his unassuming attire, he walked with a quiet confidence, his eyes scanning the room calmly. "Good morning," the man said, stepping up to Clara's desk. "I would like to make a deposit today." Clara gave him a quick glance, her gaze lingering on his simple clothes. She quickly adjusted her glasses and replied with a hint of skepticism in her tone. "Sure. I'll need to verify your account before proceeding. Please bear with me." The man nodded politely, handing her his account details. Clara typed them into the system, but a flicker of disbelief crossed her face. She leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "Are you sure these are correct?" she asked, eyes narrowing as she studied the details on her screen. "Yes, they are," the man responded, his tone calm and unwavering. Clara paused for a moment, still doubtful. She glanced back at the man, trying to get a better read on him, before continuing. "Well, it's going to take a little longer today," she said with a slight frown. "This is a significant amount of money, a transfer of $200 million. Clara's words seemed to hang in the air, and the room seemed to quiet as she waited for his response. The man, however, remained completely unfazed. "Yes, that's correct," he said evenly. Clara's eyes widened slightly, and she took a step back, her tone sharpening. "Listen, I've seen my fair share of scams. If this is some kind of joke, I suggest you leave now before I have to call security." The man maintained his calm demeanor. "I assure you, this is no joke. If you like, I can show you my business card." He opened his briefcase and extended it toward her. Clara waved it off, her skepticism growing. "I'm not interested. Scammers always carry fake cards. I'm not falling for it." Around her, the murmurs of other customers began to rise. Some of them exchanged uneasy glances, but Clara remained resolute. "I'm not scamming you," the man said, his voice firm. "I'm just here to make a legitimate deposit." Clara wasn't convinced. "People like you always think they can pull one over on the system. You can't just waltz in here claiming to have millions." She pointed at him, her voice rising. "Leave now." The scene froze for a moment, and just as Clara was about to escalate the situation, a tall figure in an expensive suit stepped into the bank. He walked slowly towards the counter, an air of authority about him. He was unnoticed at first, but as he neared, the tension in the room shifted. The man in the suit cleared his throat, catching Clara's attention. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his voice smooth but firm. Clara turned, her face reddening as she saw who it was. "Mr. Harris," Clara stammered, trying to regain her composure. "This man claims he has $200 million to deposit, and I was just about to call security." Mr. Harris, the bank CEO, raised an eyebrow and turned his gaze on the man standing beside Clara. "And why would you need to call security?" Mr. Harris asked, his voice laced with surprise. Clara, flustered, gestured to the man. "Look at him. He doesn't look like someone who would have that kind of money." Mr. Harris's eyes softened, and a knowing smile spread across his face. He turned to the man standing beside Clara. "Mr. Jenkins, it's been a while," Mr. Harris said, extending his hand warmly. "How have you been?" Clara's eyes widened in shock. "You know him?" she asked, her voice incredulous. Mr. Harris smiled. "Of course I do," he said. He turned to the curious customers in the bank. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Mr. James Jenkins, the founder of Jenkins Enterprises and our bank's largest investor." Clara's face drained of color. "But I didn't," Clara muttered, fumbling for words. Mr. Harris raised a hand to silence her and turned to the crowd. "Mr. Jenkins is not just a client. Without his investments, this bank wouldn't have survived the economic downturn. He is integral to our success." Clara's mouth moved, but no words came out. "Let me make one thing clear," Mr. Harris continued, his voice stern. Mr. Jenkins' financial support is why we are here today. His commitment to this institution is unmatched, and we have nothing but respect for him. Clara stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. Mr. Jenkins, still calm, turned to Mr. Harris. "I didn't mean to cause any disruption," he said, glancing at Clara. "I was hoping to keep things quiet, but it seems that's no longer possible." Mr. Harris, now addressing Clara, spoke with finality. "Clara, this behavior is unacceptable. You've been with us for only 2 weeks, and this is how you treat one of our most important clients?" He turned to the rest of the room. "We pride ourselves on treating every person with respect, regardless of their appearance." Clara's face burned with embarrassment as the room fell silent. Mr. Harris didn't waste another moment. "You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately," he said. "Please clear your desk and leave." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she knew there was no room for argument. Humiliated, she slowly gathered her things and walked out of the bank, her head down. As the door closed behind her, the remaining customers burst into applause. It was a moment of both surprise and justice. Mr. Jenkins turned to Mr. Harris. "Thank you for handling that with dignity. Let's proceed with the deposit." "Of course, Mr. Jenkins," Mr. Harris replied, leading him to a private office. The customers, still buzzing from the scene they had witnessed, shared the same unspoken lesson. Never judge someone based on their appearance or assumptions. As Clara Jennings made her way out of the Oakwood Trust Bank, the weight of the moment settled heavily on her shoulders. She had hoped for a smooth transition into her new role, to prove her worth and show everyone that she was capable of handling the responsibilities of managing a major financial institution. Instead, her rash judgment had cost her more than just her job. It had revealed to her a painful truth, one that many would learn the hard way: the danger of assumptions. The scene inside the bank, where the once confident branch manager had been publicly humiliated, left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed it. Clara had been quick to judge Mr. Jenkins based solely on his appearance, dismissing him as an unworthy client without even considering the possibility that he was exactly who he claimed to be. In the end, it wasn't just Mr. Jenkins' wealth that made him important. It was his integrity, his loyalty to the bank, and his role in ensuring its survival. In contrast, Clara's assumptions about what a wealthy person should look like had painted her as a shallow and impulsive individual, unprepared for the complexity of the position she had been hired to fill. For the customers still in the bank, the lesson was clear: never judge a person by how they look or what they wear. Wealth is not always visible, and success is not always worn on the sleeve. In a world increasingly driven by appearances, it's easy to forget that the most important qualities in a person, like character, determination, and experience, are often invisible. The applause that erupted after Clara's dismissal wasn't just a reaction to her poor decision-making. It was an acknowledgement that the bank's core values of respect, fairness, and dignity had been upheld. Mr. Harris, the bank CEO, had stepped in with professionalism and authority, but his handling of the situation also revealed something more profound. He understood that the success of the bank wasn't merely about numbers and financial transactions. It was about relationships, the people who trusted the institution and the people who ran it. By standing up for Mr. Jenkins, someone whose influence and investment were pivotal to the bank's survival, Mr. Harris reinforced the importance of respect and humility in leadership. Leadership wasn't about titles or displays of power. It was about knowing when to support those who had contributed the most, even when it meant confronting the wrongs done by a new employee. But Clara's misstep also opened the door for reflection. She was young, eager, and perhaps a bit too focused on making a good first impression. In her desire to assert control, she had failed to recognize the subtler, more critical aspects of her role. That leadership is about service, not domination. True leaders listen before they act. They observe, understand, and respect those they work with, whether they're in a suit or a t-shirt. Clara's unfortunate misjudgment would be a tough lesson to learn, but it could also serve as a turning point in her career. Sometimes it takes a failure like this to understand what kind of leader you want to become. For Mr. Jenkins, the incident was a mere blip in his otherwise successful day. He wasn't looking for drama. He was there to handle business as usual. Yet, even with the attention this moment brought him, he maintained his composure. His quiet confidence was a reminder that true power doesn't need to be flaunted. Wealth, status, and influence are not about grand gestures, but about steady, consistent contributions. It was Mr. Jenkins' values that made him the important figure he was, not his wardrobe or the car he drove. As for the bank, this event would no doubt be talked about for years to come. The bank's reputation for integrity had been solidified that day, not because of the smooth transactions or financial success they achieved, but because they demonstrated what it meant to uphold human dignity, respect, and professionalism in the face of adversity. In the long run, it was this incident, the one that could have been an embarrassing failure, that turned into a defining moment of leadership. In life, people often find themselves in situations where they must choose between standing by their preconceived notions and challenging them. Clara had chosen the former, but she would leave Oakwood Trust Bank with a new understanding of the power of respect, humility, and looking beyond the surface. And perhaps, with time, she would take this lesson with her into future endeavors, knowing that sometimes it's the people you least expect who make the biggest difference. The ultimate lesson for all who were present that day was clear: never judge a book by its cover. Because, as Mr. Harris had proven, appearances are just that, appearances. True value is hidden beneath the surface, and it's often those who are quietly contributing behind the scenes who are the real forces shaping the future.